Thank you very much. And a good afternoon. It's the highly coveted after lunch slot. And I'm paying attention. I've got two goals this afternoon. One, to just try and help you guys understand the media a little bit. And the other thing I want to do is make sure that nobody succumbs to an afternoon sleep. Which I'm going to try and do by waking you up with a... When hunts and activists clash, the countryside becomes a hostile environment.
Get off it! What are you doing?
Confrontation can escalate, often turning violent. The member of the prestigious Beaufort Hunt staff eventually gets the dog into position before lining up the pistol and pulling the trigger. Their aim was to prevent illegal fox hunting.
What? Hand now! Hand!
Yeah, we've got it, mate. Don't worry. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
What?
At the door! Now!
Instead, these hunt saboteurs found themselves staring down the barrel of a machine gun.
Look at me!
Yeah.
What is what?
Why are you digging out sets? The footage revealed by ITV News sealed their fate.
Hold up! No!
The deliberate digging out of a set. The release of two foxes in front of a waiting and bloodthirsty pack of hounds.
Juno!
Wiltshire Police today called on the public to help them identify those in the video, which they said appeared to show offences taking place. The Avon Vale is now facing its own demise for, of all things, hunting foxes. It's the laughter at the end that gets me every time. So that's just... if I see anyone falling asleep, I'm just going to play that again, right? It's some pretty graphic stuff, and hats off to all those people out there who have, in some respects, I think, put their lives on the line, actually, and taken enormous risks to expose the reality of what is going on in the countryside. That is one very, very small part of an enormous landscape of criminal, illegal, immoral, unethical behaviour. So anyway, I'd like, just before I get off, firstly, big thanks to the organisers of this event. An inaugural conference is an incredible thing to get off the ground. And I'm extremely grateful to all of those who poured their heart and soul into making this weekend happen. I hope the next hour just helps you understand a little of what happens behind the scenes in the media. More importantly, gives you some valuable takeaways that will enhance your ambitions and deliver, I hope, the impact and the change that we all aspire to. A little bit about myself. I'm a cutting-edge communications specialist with a background in journalism. I've spent most of it on ITV's national news, and I now help organisations bridge the gap between communications and the media. I am, in many senses, a relative newcomer to the environmental and animal welfare space, as unlike many of you, what makes me tick has been an evolution. People used to ask me what my specialism was, to which my stock answer used to be general news involving death and destruction. And I'd sort of, in a slightly black-humoured way, say, you don't want me turning up on your doorstep. But though what I discovered in later years and through the gradual process of my career at ITN was that I had a real passion for environmental animal welfare issues. I probably always had it, but I hadn't really kind of tapped into my inner self, I suppose, and discovered what it is that makes me tick. And so that's what brings me to doing those stories and what brings me to being in front of you today. As someone, and this is a really important point, as someone who stood in front of cameras for years, I have been, and a lot of this hunting stuff, I've been showered with praise for the work that I did, bringing it to the public's attention. And that's very kind, but I am literally one small part of an enormous machine, if you like, that doesn't just include the broadcasters, it includes all those people involved in that. So I'm very grateful, it's very kind of people, as they have done over the years, to come up to me and say, you've been amazing, but it really hasn't been me, it's been an enormous collaboration. And that's an important part of, for me, this talk, is that everything that is achieved has been done as part of a team. And the reporter always gets the praise, but that's not that's not right, in my opinion. So I like to think of what I did for the news as just being I was in the shop window of a big shop, and the success was down to an extraordinary group of individuals, organisations, stakeholders who collaborated. Sometimes some of those stakeholders were, I would argue, sworn enemies, people you just would not expect to get on. But when those groups come together, I think that's when change happens. And you can see it, in peace negotiations in wartime. The change happens when the warring sides ultimately come together. It might take a very long time, but when they can reach agreement, that I think is when the impact and the rewards follow. I've been very privileged to tell stories of those fighting for a better world throughout my career, but I think the most pivotal one for me has been the work that I did on fox hunting and the webinars. And on that basis, I'm going to use that as an example of what we did behind the scenes, the strategy that we built behind the scenes that delivered, I believe, a crushing impact on the so-called sport of fox hunting. So this, I hope, is the story behind the story. I was asked to come up with 3 takeaways from this chat. There's lots of overlap between all of them, as you'd expect. But the first one is building collaborative relationships with diverse stakeholders. This includes understanding the media landscape, partnering with other organisations, and working with influencers to gain greater traction. Influencers is, in a sense, a word of the last 10 years, but actually it could apply to it. It's just in a sense, a marketing term, isn't it? Anybody who has the power to make change is an influencer. So when I was first approached about the fox hunting webinars, it was very clear to me that this was a powerful story, and editorially it passed the test. It had also compelling pictures going for it. On this point, I really believe that you can increase the chances of getting your voices heard if you start to think about the media that you want to work with and how they are thinking themselves. I think in simple terms, and I've been on the receiving end of this a million times, people come to journalists thinking about themselves and not about what it is the journalist wants, right? You can still get your message out there, but if you're thinking about what is it they need to make this story run and work, then I think you will find you have greater success. And sometimes that involves just asking the journalist, what is it you need? And I can tell you what TV people need, but I might not be able to tell you what somebody from the FT needs, for example. I haven't worked in that sphere. One of the first questions any editor will ask, or anyone in a position of power behind the scenes will ask, is, what in TV we're talking about now is what pictures does it have, right? It's rightly or wrongly, and I'm not, the pictures sell, and there are stories on telly every day that they use graphics because they haven't got the pictures to tell them. But you guys and the people in this conference today make and find and exposed incredibly compelling pictures. So you've already got an advantage, I believe. They'll also ask what the top line of a story is, and who will be talking in it, and why does it matter to the viewers? So they're thinking all the time, will the viewers be interested in this? With fox hunting, that wasn't necessarily an easy sell. Nobody else was doing it. Nobody else is telling this story, right? And so we had to explain. And when I say we, I worked with a investigative producer, and we had to sell within the organisation the story that we wanted to do, and we had to persuade them. Why does this matter? Now, helpfully, most broadcasters that I'm aware of are always looking for rural stories. Rural country, they're far too. I was going to say London-centric. That's true, but let's say dominated by urban-based stories. They love rurally based and countryside stories. So that was a win for us. But even so, we had to prove to them, why is this a story that not just we should commission and spend, as it happened, an awful lot of money on, but why would our viewers be interested? And that's a really important thing. Back to the webinars, the initial approach was made on the basis that ITV News and The Guardian would work together on this story, and we would publish and broadcast at the same time. Now, that was, for me, absolutely fine. That was the rules that were kind of dictated to me by the contact. The Guardian are in on this. Would you like it too? Yeah, that's fine by me. It can be really beneficial because it gives both sides some added resource, and they're not always resource heavy when it comes to investing in a project. It's worth noting as well, I think, that print and TV don't see each other as competitors. So you can make that approach, and they will buy it because they think, well, it doesn't matter because the Guardian or the Times or whatever it is they'll publish, they've got a different readership, viewership for us. So there's a natural opportunity from the outset to bring both sides on board. The particular person who approached me with the webinar stories, who knew, they knew the journalists they were talking to. I knew that I'd known this individual for quite a long time. They knew the other person they were talking to at the Guardian. They'd known them for quite a long time as well. Personal relationships with journalists do matter, and there are a number of people, I spent a lot of time on motorways. I spent a lot of time on the phone, just speaking to contacts all the time. And some of them have become friends. I knew them that well. They were that invested in me that actually we ended up having a laugh about all sorts of stuff. But there was still a professional relationship there. And the other thing that contact knew, they really understood the value of the media that they were engaging with. So, they knew that it's difficult to know because we don't know which way it would have gone if they hadn't done it. But they knew that if they could get the Guardian and ITV on board with this, it would play much bigger, much stronger, and hopefully have more impact for them. So they really got that. And I think at this point it's just worth stating where we currently are with the media, who is watching what or reading what, where the trust lies. And trust matters because, in a very crude sense, the more people trust the media, the more likely they are to believe what they're watching or reading, and that's very important. So there's a couple of slides here, and I'm hoping you can read them. But there are some Ofcom research from last year. We are, I don't know, I was going to say, we're sort of told that the mainstream media is losing, is dying, it's not what it was, and that is true to an extent. If you look at the BBC from just 2018 to 23, it's dropping quite quickly. ITV's the same. Facebook, I thought, interestingly, is also. But when you look at where people are getting their news from, it's still the way it has been for decades. Now, there is a case, and we're in 2024, there is quite a strong argument, and it's been made by the Thomson Reuters Foundation, that by 2030, linear TV as we traditionally know it will die. And that, we know that because we're all down in it. Our own activity will prove that. But I think it's just an interesting thought that where we are today, the big media still has a big role to play. And then if you go to the next slide, and I think this one's really, and I'm hoping I'm hoping your eyesight's better than mine, but trust. There are, if you consider how much the BBC gets slammed from one day to the next, right, by almost everybody sometimes, and yet it is still the most trusted news source in line with ITV broadly. But so for all the people that want to denigrate the BBC, it's still up there. And then I think and you guys will know this intuitively, but I think trust matters, and it matters enormously to this lot. Your public service broadcasters at BBC, ITV and Channel 4, they're regulated by Ofcom. It's really helpful. Newspapers don't like regulation. I've always thought it's a real benefit. It gave contributors some recall. If I didn't portray their story or their narrative in an accurate way, if I completely misrepresented to them, they could come at me. And Ofcom has teeth, and the broadcasters are really scared of that. That said, regulation never prevented me from telling a story. It just meant I had to sometimes work out how to do it, but within the confines of the laws. Perhaps least surprising, the Star, the Sun, the Daily Mail. You'll all know this stuff. But you could argue I would say this because I come from here. I'd try and aim here. That these are the people. If we can get here, and I know you'll all want to do it anyway. But if we can get here, then people are going to start watching and think, well, intuitively they think these guys are not pulling the wool over my face. They're actually telling us the truth. So back to the webinars. We worked with The Guardian. We began the process of giving the hunting office, who at that time owned these leaked calls, the webinars, we gave them the right to reply. Now, predictably, and I would argue wrongly, what the hunting office did was go straight to lawyers. I mean, they literally, and you can imagine the hunting lot, they didn't go to any cheap lawyers either. They went straight to the expensive crowd. And they just, we put claims in front of them and said, this looks like illegal and criminal behaviour. What do you make of it? Oh, it's not. They responded, no, it's none of this. Their claim amounted to something along the lines of, you've got it all wrong. Fox hunting isn't a criminal enterprise. These are just talks designed to ensure mistakes don't happen. And they wanted to try and bully us. Well, the reason I argue is that was the wrong approach. Is I think if I was on their side and trying to offer them advice, I would have said, pick up the phone, talk to them, do an interview, deal with it now. No. You might not. It might have elongated the problem that was coming down the track, but going straight to lawyers was a really bad move. That said, it sort of worked. It didn't put us off the story. We knew it looked like a criminal conspiracy. We knew that the content of these webinars looked like a bunch of people online in a Zoom call trying to discuss how to break the law. But knowing and thinking that behind the scenes is an entire marathon away from being able to say on screen, this is criminal. And it's really, really difficult, whether it's in print media or online or wherever, but to actually call out people and say this is criminal is nigh on impossible. Even if you can see somebody with the gun in their hand doing the shooting, that is just the system we have to work in. So it's a really problematic legal hurdle to overcome. And because of it, The Guardian pulled out. So at that point, and that was devastating for us we lost a friend, and that meant that The Guardian's lawyers were saying to them, I think behind the scenes, we're not going to get this over the line. And because they pulled out, that made our lawyers twitchy too. So it was a deflating moment, and it led us to a point where we had to decide we can't progress with this story. It was so depressing. We'd spent We'd gone external, we'd gone to external lawyers, we'd spent an absolute fortune, we'd done everything we could have done, and yet we couldn't get it over the line. As I'll later explain, I think it turned out to be a blessing, but I couldn't have told you that. I can tell you that with retrospect. I absolutely could not have told you that at that moment in time. I'll just put this slide in, frankly, because we're in Manchester, and hats off to the Manchester hunt saboteurs. It's another graphic representation of what is going on out there. It felt like at that moment in time that we knew what was going on. We'd always known. The saboteurs had known for decades what was going on out there, and we couldn't get with it. We couldn't get it over the line. But what helpfully happened was the hunt saboteurs then published the webinars. So the moment we said no, they published them. It was their scoop, and they published them. That led to us losing our exclusive. Journalists love exclusives, right? We just love an exclusive. It plays well with the boss. The viewers think they're getting something special. It's like, I say that, you'll all do it, but it's often worth thinking: is it worth going to this organisation and giving them that exclusive? Depending on your relationship with that journalist or whoever it is, producer. Exclusivity is a little sales tick, I suppose. I want to sort of try and give you an idea. TV is a very, very dull and drawn out process. Yes, bombs go off and TV can report it that day, but a lot of it, especially in the investigative world, takes an awfully long time to do, and usually for a number of reasons. There are legal reasons. Often you're not the sheep. You're not following the crowd. There is safety in numbers. It's just time consuming, but I think it's worth investing in. So think, if you're approaching TV and you think they're going to buy into what you're doing, be prepared to wait and be prepared to be patient, but don't use that as an opportunity to plan. So it's going to take time. It's going to be frustrating. I've had many, when is it going to be broadcast? Yeah, it's done, but I don't know. They're trying to find a slot. It's annoying. It's always going to be annoying, but the reward is I think worth waiting for. Be patient and plan. I wrote here. Use that opportunity. So the HSA published. What happened next was a call from another contact this time who said, "You need to speak to the police." Oh, right, okay. I called up the police, and it turned out they had opened a formal investigation, and that was the trigger for us to get back in the game. So that formal investigation was absolutely critical, because suddenly an institution, a state institution, was involved and doing something, and we could report. I got the exclusive back. We could report exclusively that the police were now looking into something. The exclusivity didn't matter, actually. It wasn't. Because we were so sure this was so powerful. But that police moment was the trigger. And we had been, we'd been totally hamstrung up to that point. There were still some issues around copyright. So one of the things that was being thrown to us was, these are our webinars, said the hunting office. These belong to us. We're not giving you permission to use them. So what we did was we just copied theirs, changed the audio, put ours in, and suddenly it's our copyright and it's not theirs. We've just copied something that they've done. Hats off to the lawyers at that point, right? So that was a lawyer who came up. The lawyer said, well, creative thinking, maybe we could do this. It's like, okay, there's always a way around a problem. Now I'm going to, this next clip here, I'm going to play it because, to my mind, one of the most important stakeholders in this entire narrative is the police. And while I appreciate there are many within the animal rights sector who would not wish to pat the police on the back, I think in the case of the webinars, they deserve credit. And I put them on a list of important stakeholders. and they were a critical group to keep talking to. So this was the initial police comment to the webinars. The police recognise how divisive issues around hunting can be.
This is highly emotive, and people have very strong views on both sides, and it is for the police to review it calmly in conjunction with the Crown Prosecution Service and come to a conclusion about exactly what has taken place.
I have a theory that Paul Netherton was about to retire. I mean, he was literally about to walk out the door. And I have this image of him, and he's never compared. I have this image of him going, fucking hunting, and throwing a grenade and literally going, I'm done. It might be wishful thinking, but I kind of, I can make a logical argument for it. But he was very important. He was not only important, not because of what he said, actually. He was important. He put a proper detective on it. So it was like, we're going to do this properly. I will argue that they didn't get it exactly right. Only one person ended up in court, but he did the right thing. He treated it as the police should do, as a police investigation. They weren't the only stakeholders. I've tried to come up with a list here. I know there's people I've forgotten here, but along the way, I think we've got the police, the Huntsabs, the HSA, monitors, Protect the Wild, HIT, the League, Keep the Ban, insiders within hunting itself, former hunt staff, the CPS, politicians, Wildlife and Countryside Link, the Hunting Office, British Hound Sports Associations, national parks, private landowners, lawyers, editors, rival media, and there are many others. There's a lot of people who were invested in this particular story. It evolved over time. Building cohesion and commitment from them was absolutely critical to transforming attitudes, understanding and awareness. One of the most transformational aspects of this is when the police and the Huntsabs began to talk. And anybody, and I don't know whether you've ever done sabbing, I haven't, but I've obviously spoken to an awful lot of sabs and I'm very aware of it. These are, to say they have, I don't know what the polite way of putting it is, but they haven't always seen eye to eye, and still don't in many areas. So it's not resolved everywhere, but some of the really important part of what followed on from this broadcast was some of the communications between the police and the Huntsabs, and that again is two warring sides actually talking to each other. Shifting the focus from individual stories to strategic narratives, so exploring how crafting a cohesive strategic narrative can amplify the message and reach a wider audience. Now, this was never just one story. I mean, it could have been one story. We could have stopped where we were and said, that was great, well done. That was, well done. That was a pat on the back, off we go. In TV, they have a saying often, is there a day 2 or a day 3 in this? Right? And what that means is, where is this story going to take us? And I like that saying because it has that element of looking for more. It's not the rest on your laurels kind of, it's the let's see where this is going to take us. And the question that we asked ourselves all the time while we were working towards that initial broadcast was, where do we go once we've done it? What is the next step? And a contact, reminded me recently, and I had forgotten this actually, that they were stunned when we broadcast the webinars on day 1, and then hunting was still on the news 3 days later. It was like they were like, we couldn't, but it was like, what was going on? We couldn't believe what we were watching. One hit was good, we had 3 in a week. And the reason why that, and this goes back to actually us failing to get the story over the line the first time round, was the webinars were already out there, so even before we broadcast, the Huntsabs had put them out there, and that meant that various landholders, other stakeholders had seen them. And I had a contact who called me up and said, I think you need to call the National Trust. And which obviously I did. And the day after the webinar's broadcast, the National Trust announced that they were suspending trail hunting on their land, right? it was a big deal. It had been on the agenda for them previously, but they instantly moved to suspend trail hunting, as did a number of other really large landowners. And that was what gave us the day 2 and 3. And we knew in advance, I knew in advance, that I didn't know what they were going to do, but I'd been told, call the National Trust. So I knew that something was coming. The strategy then moved on to what I like to call little and often. Right, we'd had our massive hit. It had caused ruptions. You could see in all the various chat rooms that those within hunting were. They could see the impact this was going to have. It was possibly, and we're not there yet, but it was possibly a death knell moment for them. And the more sensible people in there could see this was absolutely devastating for them. What I like about what I call little and often is I think I then found myself in a place where, and I had to turn down a lot of stories, but I found myself people coming to me and going, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you done this? Have you done that? It's like, okay, right. And I thought we need to leverage this. There's lots of stories here. We could tell from online how well this was doing. You could see, we learned very quickly that every time we dropped a hunting story online that was just bubbling away with people, suddenly it peaked every time. And actually that's quite true of a lot of animal welfare stories. If you can get it out there, there's real public engagement. I mean, I know you know this stuff anyway, but when you look at the data behind the scenes, you see the spike. They see, oh my God, look, this is working. And of course they want more of that. So little and often amounted to just trying to do as many stories as we could do as often as possible, just so that it was permanently ticking over. Always reminding people about the webinars, always reminding people that fox hunting is illegal, that that there are people out there that using it as a smokescreen. The whole thing is a sham. Whatever it was, we were just constantly reminding them. In the same way that an advertiser will put, the car companies will have adverts every day of the week. If they did one advert, they'd never sell a car, but they just do them all the time. And we buy into that, whether we like it or not. We do buy into that. So there's a few. I mean, this is a. I don't know, is it going to work? Let's see. It's just a snapshot. I say it's a snapshot. It's quite a lot of the stories over the next couple of years that we did around hunting. Some of them were videos. Some of them were just short online pieces. The court cases are very beneficial, and I'll just add this in here. Is that somebody would come to us with some footage, and I could see that it was. They'd say, well, have you complained to the police? No, we haven't. Right, okay. Could you complain to the police, please? Because we need the police investigation. Just let us know, because I then would go to, in the case of, I can't think of which one it is, but in the case of this guy here, I would go to whatever his local police force was and say, are you investigating this? They'd come back and say, yeah, we are. Okay, great. It's another example of so we would then have first opportunity for some publicity, the police investigation. Second opportunity, if they choose to charge anybody, we'll mention that too. Third opportunity, the start of the court case. And fourth opportunity, hopefully the conviction at the end of it. So you've got 4 hits out of one. You've got 4 hits out of one story, at least, depending on what it was. In the case of the Avon Vale, I forget, we got 2 or 3 hits from day one, because it was just, even those in hunting couldn't run away from what was going on. There. So that's the little and often thing. Just, we just kept churning it out week after week, and this wasn't, I was doing a million other things, but every time I tried to add out, I thought, this is good. I can just give this to the web. I can take me half an hour to write something up. Here's the pictures. I've got the rights to reply from the Hunting Office or the British Hand Sports Association. I've got the I've got the comment from the police or the verification from the police. I've ticked all the boxes. The lawyer's happy. Job done. And all those things, as I understand it, and you guys again will know this better than me, but all those hits generate also then publicity for your causes. So they generate, they're a benefit to your brands, they're a benefit to your followers, they generate income. It's that day 2, day 3 thinking. What have we got here, and how are we going to maximise it? And that may lead you to questions in Parliament, and we've got 4 parliaments in this country. There's a lot of places we can get questions asked, and some of them, Wales and Scotland, are a bit further down the line with animal welfare than Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland somewhere else, I think, but it's kind of not on everything. But on hunting, you can still legally hunt foxes in Northern Ireland, and where Wales and Scotland go, arguably England eventually catches up. It might take more time, but they. So we're blessed with other outlets where we can get our causes mentioned. So that's little and often. And then delivering the message in the right way, ensuring clarity, tone, and who delivers the message is critical to being heard, understood, and valued. I think some people are more natural in front of a camera than others. There's no way of getting away from that, and sometimes we just have to be honest with ourselves about, is this individual the right person to put in front of the camera, or do they, they might be the chief executive. And I was involved in a organisation at one point that did executive recruitment for people that were in very, very high profile roles, and part of that recruitment process was to do a media exercise, and for me that meant doing 5 identical interviews with 5 different people, and it was always really enlightening to me, because you've got people who, often they're already at the top of their game and they're moving into another. Some people just could not perform in front of a camera. That's no reflection on them. They were probably the most brilliant chief executive or you've ever come across, but their natural place was not to be in front of a camera. They could have had some media training that might have helped, but it's important to think about it, because when a journalist then sits down to edit something, if they're thinking, how am I going to cut this person? How am I going to make this doesn't work? I know what they're trying to say, but they stumbled, or they, you can only cut out so many ums and ahs before you completely lose the context of what they're saying. So it's important to think about it, and that, I don't believe that's a reflection on people at all. I know we've all got strengths and weaknesses, and there's things I'm really not very good at, and there are some things I'm better at, and that's just the way it is. But it's important, I think, to think about it, and also to think about the message. Going back to that experience I had with executive recruitment, the really good ones were in charge of the interview. So there's me thinking I'm the reporter here. I've got years of experience. The really good ones had a way in which they held the narrative. They knew exactly what it was they wanted. We only gave them half an hour in which we gave them an example of what to do, and they build a narrative from that and key messaging that went within it, and they stuck to it. So yeah, and I didn't feel like my question wasn't being answered, but I also didn't feel like I was in control. I thought this person, this man, this woman is really good at what they're doing. They're just doing it. So it's think about the messaging, think about and stick to that messaging. And with hunting, the absolute gift with the webinars, the absolute gift was the word smokescreen, right? The hunting office gave the word. It was like a brand word. They sold it to those who opposed them. The whole thing is a smokescreen, right? And almost anything you read about hunting nowadays, wherever they've got that right to reply, it might be from the league or the Hunt Sabs, whoever the group is, it almost always includes the word smokescreen. It's a really powerful. It's like it's take back control in Brexit, isn't it? It's that sort of. The whole thing is a smokescreen. And the police, and again, I'm going to just go back to them, because they don't say anything in the police without considering what they're saying. Matt Longman took over from Paul Netherton, actually, they're both at Devon and Cornwall Police. I mean, killing a fox with a pack of hounds is illegal. It's wrong, and it's prolific in the UK. Now, he still is, I think, the national lead on fox hunting in the UK. I mean, that for him to come out and say that particular sentence there, it demonstrates a total sea change in the way in which the police viewed fox hunting. And this next clip, which is from my former colleague Alex Thompson at Channel 4 News, is another example of how far the whole narrative has shifted around.
The hunters and the SABs regularly clash, but much of the illegality only comes to light due to the work of those monitoring the hunts.
People can get very passionate about the subject on both sides, but the fact is that one side is trying to stop something illegal and another side is intent on perpetuating some illegal activity.
I mean, it's gobsmacking. It is absolutely gobsmacking. You know, he's the head of the National Wildlife Crime Unit, I think, and so what Ollie Fisher and Matt Longman are saying, I mean, it's like that was not being talked about pre-2020. I mean, it just wasn't. And, you know, Hunt Sabs would say the same thing. So the police have entirely shifted their focus. Now, of course, as I said, not all police forces seem to have got the message. But it's the fact that these guys are doing it and at that level that I think, and they consider everything they're doing. You know, they know what they're saying and who they're saying it to. Despite having said all of that, how far has this particular issue got to go? I like Google Trends. It's a very simple kind of, you know, what are people searching for? So this is the bubble, right? I've lived in a bubble where I've learned an awful lot about fox hunting, and therefore I've dangerously at times assumed that those outside the bubble are all aware of what's going on and are interested in it. And to be fair, a lot have picked up on fox hunting. You know, it has happened, but the last time fox hunting was really interesting to the public was when it was being debated in Parliament, when the Hunting Act was going through, right? So that was what was going on there. I think from memory that was Theresa May saying she was going to bring it back. I think something like that. So probably not one of her best decisions. And then it's bubbled away. You know, there's many ways, but it's a crude example. I think it also says, and we've no way of predicting what the future holds, but it also says, and I would believe that there's a bit of a fight to come, because depending on the outcome of a general election, you know, if Labour were to get into government, they have made a commitment. Right, you know, 20 odd years after they tried to ban it once, they're going to try and ban it again, and it's unlikely that those in favour of fox hunting are going to let it go quietly. So, and fox hunting is seen in some parts as, if you can deal with fox hunting, you can solve a lot of there are some people who think you deal with fox hunting, you can solve a lot of other animal welfare and animal related issues. There are a very powerful cohort of MPs and Lords who look at any piece of legislation, and if they think it's going to impact their fun times killing animals, right, they won't let it through. So there's a lot of legislation that is being clogged up because of hunting. And it may be, I don't know, I'm trying to look into a crystal ball here a little bit, but it may well be that as and when this gets over the line, assuming it does, and that's a dangerous thing to say, but you know, Labour have committed to it, but I think it's going to come to the fore again in a way that it hasn't done for a very long time, and you know, the Conservative and those supporters in rural areas are going to fight it tooth and nail. So, yeah, that sort of brings me to the end, really. I mean, whatever we're going to do to highlight, expose and drive change, I believe we must build collaborative relationships with diverse stakeholders. And we need to shift the focus as much as we can, and it can't be done all the time, but we need to shift the focus as much as we can from individual stories to strategic narratives. Strategy, we need to think all the time further. Where does this take us next? And a lot of the time we'll never get there. There was many times there was never a day 2 or a day 3, right? But there will be a day 2 and a day 3 if we think that's what we want to achieve. We need to deliver, and we need to ensure the message is hitting the right target, and understand that, you know, if you want to collectively improve animal welfare, it must be done together. I genuinely believe that collectively we can make that happen. Individually, possibly, but when we all group together, all the organisations come together, I think actually that is where the power lies. So thank you very much.
Okay, so we've got some time for questions, so if you want to put your hand up, and then we'll come around the room.
Don't all shout at once. And I'm here for a couple of hours after. You don't have to feel you have to grab me in a public forum. Hello, Evelyn.
I'm Laura. I work for Viva. That was very interesting. Thank you. I wondered if you've got any tips of how to get undercover investigations into the news, because, yeah, it's been getting harder, really. And, yeah, like you say, often you've got, we always try to do exclusives, but then you got one newspaper stringing you along for 2 weeks, and then they drop it. Then you go to the next, and it's all dragging. And, we tried, like, ITV was interested, and then not anymore. So, it's quite tricky, though, if you've got any thoughts on that.
I'm aware of some of the things, some of the troubles that you've had. For me, it's get them in early and get them invested. And if I can persuade an editor that the story's worth investing in, it's more likely to reach its conclusion. So quite often what people would do is come to me with material after they'd done it and said, here, what do you think of this? And then I would go to an editor and say, so-and-so's bought me this, what do you think? They go, oh, that's horrible. Now what can we, and then they think, how do we add value to this? So it's that, and at that point it comes a little unstuck. I'm like, well, I don't know what I can do around this because they've already done the work, and it starts to become a bit problematic. Whereas if somebody had come to me from the outset, and bearing in mind all broadcast journalists, they have to be impartial, right? So although I knew a lot of the time what was going on, I never commissioned anything. I never went to an organisation and said, can you do this? Can you do that? Because that wasn't my job. My job was to report what they were doing. Had they come to me and said, we're going to go and do this on X date, would you like to come along? Right? And there are legal barriers to that. You know, I had a lawyer once said, yeah, Rupert, you can go along with them, but you can't leave the public footpath. I was like, well, that's fine, but the public footpath, there's a wood between me and where they want to go, and I can't see through the wood. I was talking to somebody here earlier about footpaths through farms. Quite often there are footpaths right through the middle of farms. So there is ways, but an early invitation. If you bring them in from the outset and get them invested, then, in my experience, that is more likely to deliver the results rather than the other way around. And you don't have to. You might have done, yeah. You might have. No, and you may well have done that. Yeah, if that scenario, you know that there's a farm full of pigs that are being, abused. You know that already, and there's a way in which you could invite an organisation along to do it. Broadcasters will be more reticent. They're just more protective, and the legal barrier is a bit higher. And the other thing is be really open and honest. My experience, journalists you can trust. I would like to think. But you need to, don't surprise them with anything they don't already know. Just lay your cards on the table. This is what we're doing. This is who we are. And we're planning on doing this. Would you like to come along and bear witness? Does that help? Yeah. Oh, come and find me after. Yeah. That's all right. Yeah. Anyone else? Unless anyone else is.
Great talk, Rupert. You said about really trying to understand what journalists need and want, and what matters to viewers. What other animal issues would you say, like a resonant that matter to both viewers and journalists?
It's if you can try and. Quite often, it's the things that touch us emotionally, isn't it? So there are going to be, I think, some stories that if you can inject the human element into it somehow, so some footage that might have a farmer abusing an animal is, I think, likely to travel further than a footage of just an abused animal, right? Because people can identify with that person kicking or hitting, or I don't know if you remember, there was somebody who out hunting who kicked a horse, was kicking a pony. I think she was a school teacher, and that if it had just been an abused pony or an abused horse, it wouldn't have. But it was the human element of that person doing something that people intuitively felt disgusted by. I know there's a senior BBC guy here in Manchester. His whole thing is the human thing, and want people to be able to relate and identify with this on a human level. So is it a dog being? People have got dogs. Is it a dog being abused? I think one of the difficulties that salmon farming issues have, right, and it's a really big area, is I don't think we have the emotional attachment to salmon in the way that we do to to farm animals and livestock or pets. But that would, for me, the biggest thing. Is this going to get you on is this going to get somebody on an emotional level? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You've got that human interaction with the animals and the people. You can see the emotion on people's faces. You can see the emotion from the animals themselves, and that really works, I think, for
it does work, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Was that Pignorant? Was that the stuff featured in Pignorant?
That Joey came. Yeah, Joey's been a few times, and they did the undercover gas chamber investigation there. Filming.
See, I controversially, I don't know. I've got Joey's email address, but controversially, I would have edited that slightly differently.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Only because it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's just, and it turns out, or it does. But when I watched it, I was like, I'm not sure I can continue watching this. It's really graphic from the outset. I don't think emotionally I was ready for what I was about to see. I would have maybe turned it slightly on its head and just gradually introduced the idea that what's coming down the line in this film, but by which time you've hooked people in. I don't know. Yeah. That's a very subjective opinion because it's a good film.
I see it differently.
Do you? No, that's fine. It is subjective.
Yeah, but I think he's open to opinions.
Yeah,
if you get in touch with him.
I just found it a really difficult. Basically, I found it a really difficult watch, but it worked. It's and you had good experience with The Guardian.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Excellent. Anyone else?
Hi, Rupert. Thanks for that. I'm an academic here at Manchester. I have a question about messenger credibility and your views on who is a credible messenger. Are the organisations in our movement seen as credible messengers? Are there people or types of people or professions who are trusted messengers that we could try and work with? And people have talked about vets. There are people I've met here who are vets, kind of famously trusted group of people. Obviously, the movement also has connections with various kind of celebrity spokespeople, the Chris Packhams of the world.
Yeah.
But they're always there in every story. So, just how should we approach that? thinking about that? Who's credible? Who's best placed? Who's going to get that buy-in?
Academics asked a big question that could have a thesis of an answer. It's I mean, just on the celebrity side of it, you know, it's editors will go, well, we had them on last week, or we've had them on. So you have to kind of share it around. I think and I think also, and I say this, you know, people came to me with all the hunting stuff because I was doing it. But I understood that some of the people I went to would often go to other organisations because they needed to share it around. They needed to make sure that, ideally, make sure that everyone got their exclusives. It's a good point on how do you pick and choose who the messenger is. I'm sure that there are biases within newsrooms, right? I mean, we know that newsrooms have historically, they've tried to change. They're not the most diverse places, right? So does it help to think about who we're picking and choosing to put in front of that camera? Yes. And do you think about what they're wearing? Yeah, I think you probably do. I mean, it's not for the journalist to think about that, but it does send a message, right? And if you're trying to reach into Middle England, or you're trying to reach into people that you want to engage with, who you perhaps haven't traditionally engaged with, then I think it's really worth thinking about exactly that. You know, who are we choosing? There's a massive push on diversity, you know, so and there has been for years, rightly so. You know, broadcast media was desperately undiverse. You know, it was full of white men, not just reporting, but in the contributors as well. And now they at ITV, certainly after every programme, they've kept an eye on who have we had contributing today, male, female, white, non-white, whatever it is. You know, they're absolutely, the racial diversity and the gender diversity is front and centre. So if you want to, you know, quite often you can't. There are too many men in the programme. There are, you know, that happens, and they'll go, we need more women. You know, so it's subtle things like increasing the amount. You know, put the women in front as your spokespeople. You might, you know, without unbeknownst to you, you might be that person that day who gets on because they've got far too many men in the programme, and they're just like, we can't have this. This is unacceptable. So there are lots of organisations just too busy doing that. I don't have an easy answer to there's no easy answer to your question, but I do think it's really important to think about who are we talking to, and if they sound and feel similar, or they are a trusted profession like vets, that I'm sure that carries value. Can you do the research on it and then answer the question? Has anyone done the research on it on that time? There must. I wouldn't know. Yeah, it's a good question. Anyone else? There was somebody here. Yeah. Have we got time for one more? Have we?
Really, really quick.
Go on then. One quick one. Go on then, very quickly, and then we've got to wrap it up.
Is timing a thing? So obviously the news is quite saturated. Let's say there's a huge story, and you have, let's say, I forgot the lady's name, but who works at Viva, and she has a great thing to share. Well, great thing, but an expose that would add value in a normal situation. But let's say this huge thing's blown up. Should you hold on to that and deliver that once it's settled down? Is timing an issue, or is it just...
If you can, if you can, and you know, sometimes you'll just get blown out of the water because something massive has happened, and there are obvious dates in the diary that you'll choose to avoid anyway, because you can see that budget day, you know, or election results day, or whatever it is. Funnily enough, the day of an election is quite a good day because the broadcasters are banned from talking about the election on an election day, right? So they are looking for other things to do. It's not necessarily ideal, but there is, you know, so you can pick and choose. Fridays are quieter, and weekends they're very skeletal. You know, so yeah, timing, but you can't always predict it.